When you think about a company, who do you actually picture calling the shots? The CEO? Maybe the famous founder? Well, the truth is, under the surface of every single corporation, there's this whole complex system of rules and power structures. It's all designed to keep things running smoothly. But who's really in control, and what's to stop them from driving the whole thing off a cliff? Okay, let's get into it. I mean, this is really the number one question of corporate governance, isn't it? Just imagine for a second you own a piece of a company. You're a shareholder. You've put your hard-earned money in, but you're not the one showing up to the office making decisions every day. So who's watching the people at the very top? And what happens when what they want isn't what you, the owner, want? You know, the entire system is really built on this one wild idea. A company is its own person in the eyes of the law. It's a separate legal entity. Now, the separation between the people who own it and the people who manage it is what makes big business possible, but it also creates this central problem we're talking about. The owners aren't the ones running the show day to day. That job, well, it falls to a very specific group of people. And that brings us to the first piece of the puzzle, the board of directors. You can kind of think of them as the brain of the company, right? They're the ones appointed to manage, to guide, and to make all the big strategic decisions. But what does it even mean to be a director? The official definition in the Companies Act is, you might be surprised, incredibly simple. A director is just a person appointed to the board. That's it. But that simple title hides a ton of complexity, because in the eyes of the law, a director has to wear a whole bunch of different hats. What's really fascinating is that the courts have said a director isn't just one thing. When a director is out there signing a contract for the company, they're acting as an agent. When they're protecting the company's money and assets, they're basically a trustee. And when they're overseeing the whole business operation, they're pretty much a managing partner. They have to juggle all these roles, often all at the same time. And the board itself isn't just a room full of the same type of person. The law actually demands some diversity, not just for the sake of fairness, but to make sure there are different perspectives in the room. For instance, bigger companies are required to have at least one woman director. You might also find a nominee director, who's there specifically to look out for the interests of a big investor. And then you've got the managing director, the one who's really hands-on with the day-to-day management. Okay, so you've got this really powerful group of people in charge. What stops them from just abusing that power? Well, they have a very strict rule book to follow. And let me tell you, the consequences for breaking those rules can be pretty severe. This is the real heart of governance. Now, this is a huge deal. For the first time, the Companies Act of 2013 actually wrote all these duties down in black and white, right there in Section 166. You can think of it as their legal and ethical compass. They have to act in the company's best interest, they have to be careful and diligent, they must avoid any conflicts of interest, and they can't use their position to get rich unfairly. Simple as that. And this is where the rubber meets the road. An ultra vires act, it's a fancy term for when a director does something that's beyond the company's legal authority. If they use company cash for something they're not supposed to, they are personally on the hook to pay it back. It breaks through that corporate separation and makes them directly, personally accountable. So the directors have their duties, they have their rule book, but who's the referee? Who actually holds them to those duties? Well, this brings us to the other side of the whole equation, the shareholders. So are they the real bosses? Well, they've definitely got the tools for the job. Don't think for a second that shareholders are just along for the ride. They have a whole toolkit of rights. The biggest one, of course, is the right to vote. They get to vote on huge decisions, including who even gets to be a director in the first place. They also have a right to information and, really importantly, legal protection if they feel like management is treating them unfairly. And the main event, the big stage where shareholders get to use their power, is the annual general meeting, or AGM. Once a year, the top brass has to stand in front of the owners, present the company's report card, and answer for all their decisions. It's basically the ultimate performance review for the entire board. But what happens when that system of checks and balances just fails? What if the people in charge start acting in ways that are harsh or unfair or just flat out wrong? Well, this is where we get into the heavy stuff: oppression and mismanagement. So generally speaking, company law follows something called the rule of the majority. It comes from this really old case back in 1843. The basic idea is that courts shouldn't get involved in a company's business if the majority of shareholders are okay with what's happening. But, and you knew there was a but coming, right? There are massive exceptions to that rule. And they cover things like fraud, those ultra vires acts we talked about, and most importantly, the oppression of minority shareholders. So, what does oppression actually mean here? Well, the Supreme Court gave us a pretty clear definition. It's conduct that is burdensome, harsh, and wrongful. And it's not about one single bad decision. It's a continuous pattern of behavior, a lack of fairness that basically pushes a group of owners to the side. And if you can prove oppression, the courts can bring down the hammer. They have some really powerful tools. They can force the company to buy out the minority shareholders, they can fire the directors who caused the problem, and they can even step in and regulate how the company is run from now on. In the most extreme cases, they can shut the whole company down.
Okay, so this all brings up a really interesting practical question. We know directors have all this power and responsibility, but how much freedom do they really have day to day? Like, does the managing director need to run to the board and ask for permission for every little thing? Let's look at a quick case.
So check this out. In a case from 2007, a managing director filed a lawsuit to evict some tenants from a property the company owned, but the tenants fought back. Their argument was that the MD never got a specific formal authorization from the board to file this particular suit. So the court had to answer, was he overstepping his power? And the court's answer was a clear no. The ruling basically said that filing a lawsuit like this is part of what substantial powers of management means. It's an essential, normal part of managing the daily business of the company. A managing director doesn't need to get a permission slip for every single operational decision. So, as we start to pull all these threads together, what's the big picture here? Well, at the end of the day, it's all about finding the right balance. You've got to give the management team the freedom to actually run the business and make progress, but you also need rock-solid accountability to protect the people who own it. And that's really the main takeaway. The entire system, all the directors' duties, the shareholder rights, the legal remedies, it's all designed to manage this one constant tension. It's this delicate dance between letting the experts lead while making absolutely sure they're leading everybody in the right direction. Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. In a world where corporations are more powerful and influential than ever before, is this rulebook that we've been talking about, a rulebook built over centuries, is it still enough? Is it strong enough to guarantee fairness and to make sure that with great power, there is always great accountability? That's a question worth chewing on.